I want to start out by I want to start with this. In 1958, a man named Cleon Skousen wrote a book called The Naked Communist. In it, he listed 45 communist goals to attain to take over America. In 1963, these communist goals were entered into congressional record by Florida Congressman Albert Herlong Jr. Tonight, I want to focus on 3 of these goals, and I'll let you decide on the relevancy. Goal number 38. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to the social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. Goal number 39. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over this who oppose communist goals. Goal number 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppress influence of parents. That being said, in approximately 2001, my marriage ended to my former ex-husband because he was being physically abusive with me. My daughter was only 2 at the time. I started out being a single mom, moved forward, tried to raise her on my own and did. Like I stated before, being her primary custodial parent for this entire time. In approximately 2010 and 2011, my former husband was accused of child abuse by his then girlfriend, her son. And so at that time, of course, knowing what I know and what he's capable of, I went back to the courts. I wanted to try to get my daughter out of that toxic environment. I went to the courts, to the proper channels that we're supposed to go through, and at that time, I didn't know this, but I realized that Arizona was starting to change a lot of their laws, and it was starting to turn into a pro-father state. And this was very much large in part due to our then governor, Janet Napolitano. So not only did he not suffer any repercussions at that time for the allegations of abuse from the child who reported it to his school, but he ended up getting 50-50 custody of our daughter, and after me being primary custodial parent for 10, 12 years, and he had never spent that much time with her, even in having her in his care. Approximately 6 to 8 months later, my daughter started reporting to me that her father was abusing her. She had a really hard time telling me about it, but we have a really close relationship, and so that told me this was hard. And she's not a complainer. She's a very soft-spoken, sweet child. She's a very mature child. She's bright. She's all honor student. She's just a sweetheart, just a gem. I can't even imagine anybody hurting her. There would never be any reason. She started telling me that he was verbally abusing her, and then just emotionally, she said she always had to walk on eggshells around him. And then she started telling me that he was physically abusing her. Of course, knowing what I know and knowing what he's capable of personally, from personal experience, once again, I went through the courts because that's what I'm told that I have to do. The police couldn't handle it. They couldn't take it. They couldn't take it on. They said it has to be handled through family court. I didn't have a choice. So, or so I thought. Or that's what they make us believe. So I once again go through the courts as any normal mother would do to go protect their child, and I was awarded emergency temporary custody of her for pretty much all of 2013. She reported this to the police. She went through a child forensic interview. She went through, had to go through a counseling program with the only PhD in this case at all. She was really there, ordered by the court under limited scope to just be the therapist who would work with my daughter and her father to reunify their relationship, to try to better their communication was her real only goal. I mean, why she was appointed by the courts. Now this will come into play later and make sense. So in the course of the rest of 2013, we went on to go through hearing after hearing after hearing, status conferences, you name it, and then one by one, court-appointed officials were assigned, one being a court-appointed advisor. My daughter told her everything, and same thing, next we go on, and then she goes to the counselor, then she goes through the forensic interview, never deviating from her story once, telling everybody exactly what he's been doing to her. It's in reports everywhere from the police reports. She is extremely afraid of her father. And all of this was just falling on deaf ears. No one was doing anything about it. Nobody was, we were just following the process in court. Her father was given supervised visits. And my mom was assigned as one of the supervisors to supervise those visits. My pastor was assigned as one of those supervisors. A close family friend at the time was supervised. Every time they went to these supervised visits, he was constantly doing things that my daughter was requesting that he not do, and specifically requesting that she not ever be left alone with him. He doesn't ever want her touching him, hugging her, anything. She doesn't want him taking pictures. She's afraid of him, and she's let everybody know exactly her feelings, and like I said, she never deviated. My former husband barked loud enough and said that he didn't care for the supervisors at the time, so the judge orders a court-appointed supervisor to start supervising these visits. This supervisor came in, and he knew the story and everything in the beginning too, and he affirmed to me that he would never put our daughter back in that household with this kind of toxic environment. I've had orders of protections against him, several over the years, harassment injunctions I've had to file against his wife. Now, the one whose child accused my ex-husband of child abuse. So I'm seeing all this and I'm going, this is unreal. It's just not real, but this is our system. And so this court-appointed supervisor, as status conferences were coming around and going, and each time I started realizing, I started hearing all these buzz terms coming back to one buzz term that kept coming out that my ex-husband's attorney started using in everything from the pre-trial statement to everything that came up in court, and it all referenced and went back to what's known now as just a pop psych term. It's called parental alienation. And back in the 1980s, Dr. Richard Gardner wrote a book about what he termed parental alienation syndrome to be. He later admitted that no scientific studies had been conducted to prove his theory. Despite this, his theory caught on and became widely used in high-conflict custody cases. He was often used as an expert witness in cases when parental alienation syndrome was alleged. He was compensated rather handsomely for it. The problem was his newly discovered syndrome was not only designed to place the child back with the abusive parent, but it was falsely accused the protecting parent, usually the mother. Protected her from being falsely accused of coaching the child to make these accusations shockingly. The lawyers and judges across America were buying it. This is what happened in my case. As if that wasn't enough, Gardner's true intentions were present in both his writings and interviews he had given. In one case, he stated, older children may be helped to appreciate that sexual abuse encounters between an adult and a child are not universally considered to be a reprehensible act. He said, the child might be told about other societies in which such behavior was and is considered normal. In such discussions, the child has to be helped to appreciate that we have in our society an exaggeratedly punitive and moralistic attitude about adult-child sexual encounters. This quote appeared in a 1992 article that Gardner wrote for the Creative Therapeutics magazine under the title True and False Accusations of Sex Abuse. It continues. If the mothers reacted to the abuse each form of abuse in a hysterical fashion or used it as an excuse for a campaign of denigration of the father, then the therapist does well to try and sober her up. Her hysterics will contribute to the child's feeling that a heinous crime has been committed and thereby lessen the likelihood of any kind of rapprochement with the father. Worse, in the same article, he states that pedophilia should not be excluded from the list of so-called natural forms of human sexual behavior. The man who published many of his articles, Dr. Ralph Undergard, was quoted in an interview with Pedica, the Journal of Pedophilia. Pedophiles need to become more positive and make the claim that pedophilia is an acceptable expression of God's will for love and unity among human beings. When I started hearing all these terms, they used every form of parental alienation, because parental alienation itself is actually not even acknowledged by the American Medical Association or the American Psychological Association. It's not a syndrome. It's not. There's studies that prove there's nothing. Fathers are simply using it. They've dropped off the S because it's not a syndrome. It's not a medical condition. So now they're just using parental alienation. And they've used every form you can imagine, every synonym that you could possibly imagine to cover up parental alienation, because it supposedly wasn't even supposed to be admissible in court. So they started using other choice terms to change the name. And so basically they were convincing the courts that mothers are coaching their kids to fear their fathers. It's now what I'm learning, and the only, let me kind of fast forward. This court-appointed supervisor, even though in the beginning he was saying that there was absolutely no way he was going to protect my daughter, and he was going to do everything that he was going to do to make sure that she was taken care of and put back at home with me, which is all she's ever asked for, which is all she's ever wanted. And my daughter comes forward, has the courage to expose her father, her own father, for the abuse. And she's being done a grave injustice now for having the courage to come forward and do that. What are we teaching? What are we teaching our children? And how is this not so much more devastating for her and what she's going to take into her future with her? This court-appointed supervisor eventually, over time, somehow, just the same as the court-appointed advisor, the judge, my ex-husband, his attorney, all these terms kept recycling over and over. In the end, the only one who did, and this is where this comes back into play also, the only one with any credentials, PhD, was the therapeutic supervisor who was working with trying to reunify or help the communication between my daughter and her father. She was the only PhD, the only credentialed individual in this whole process. Never once brought up the term, never once diagnosed any, never once said anything about parental alienation whatsoever. She wasn't questioned, she wasn't asked, she wasn't in any of our hearings, she never stated more than a couple of words. By the end of 2013, in December, the judge ruled. I have an 18-page ruling here that over and over and over, like I said, I can't tell you how many times there are so many different ways that it was said that I was parentally alienating our daughter, and he gave sole custody to my ex-husband. No way. So obviously you can imagine my devastation. Not knowing what to do, not knowing where to turn, I started asking around, and I was referred to an organization in Arizona called Defenders of Children. And they were the ones that started to enlighten me on what parental alienation is even all about. This is where I got the majority of my information. I've got an article here that helps explain a lot if anybody wants to see it afterwards. They wrote an entire book on the subject. Right now, I wish I'd have known then what I know now. Things could be different. When my daughter learned that her father got custody of her, my honor student, my brilliant, beautiful child, getting requests from national universities all over the place. She's excelling so well, she does, and she's such a wonderful kid. Became a runaway. She refused to go back to her father's house. Now, the only thing that our judge did grant me, one thing that he did do, because I begged him to give her own attorney, I begged him to give her a voice, I begged him to talk to her. See for yourself, you know, she'll tell you, she will tell you. It was a moot point, basically. But he did award me, I requested that my daughter have a safe haven counselor. Amen. And so she was able to go talk to somebody and know that she couldn't, that her father wouldn't know about it. It was a safe place for her. Well, when she started running away, that safe haven counselor at that point becomes a mandatory reporting source. She had to report it to CPS. CPS then steps in. They do their own little investigation, and just within a month or so later, 2 months, on February 7th, they came and took my daughter from school and have had her in their custody ever since. She is now in custody of the state. She is under custody. I get 1 hour a week with my daughter in a supervised setting where I can't even talk to her and really ask her how she's really doing, how she feels, how, you know, I'm not even, because I would be alienating her, of course, and so I'm thinking, how is this not alienation? She's been ripped from her home where she's safe and comfortable, and that's all she's asked is to come back home. And again, what's this teaching her? This is teaching her not to want to talk ever, not to want to tell the truth, not to want, you know, I grew up, my parents raised me. Somebody's hurting you, you tell. The schools teach you that. Bullying assemblies. I raised my daughter this way, just the way I was raised, because this is the right way. And this is what she knows now. So now she's been placed in a placement home with a family who I don't get to talk to her. This is literally all I get. And an 18-page ruling that says I'm the parental alienator. And this again, it's become an industry, is what I'm learning. Defenders of Children has educated me so much. With the help of Roy Kenny, I've been trying to get educated as much as possible, empower myself to get out here and talk. and see, you know, whether it's someone else that I can help, because now what I know I could have done different. Maybe there are other mothers out there that I can help. Maybe there's somebody out there that can help me get through the system. I've gone to state legislators. Their hands are tied because now once it goes into the court systems, it's out of their jurisdiction. So, and they've told me that they believe that that's why CPS went and took her from school. Blindsided me, basically. I didn't have a chance. I didn't have a chance to fight to protect her. That was the last day I saw her. They took her from school. Unbeknownst to me, I wouldn't see her again. And we are now in dependency court because family court has been put on stay because dependency court trumps family court. So now we've been in this process for over 5 months now, and no end in sight. All I'm doing is jumping through hoops the CPS tells me to. The caseworker enjoys telling me over and over that she has custody of my daughter, and all I need to do is just jump through the hoops. Psychological evaluations, drug tests. I'm a 25-year employee with a major airline, but they're drug testing me. We get randomly drug tested. Parenting classes, so I can learn to be a better parent. I can have a much better child, I'm sure, and so these are called services, and I'm supposed to just follow them, do everything that I'm supposed to do. And maybe someday I'll get my daughter back. Maybe. That's not even at this point. It's all still, and we don't know how long. She's with a placement family now. At this point, she's starting her sophomore year. I missed her entire freshman year. We did everything together. I'm an involved mother. Everything from Girl Scout troop leader when she was a little girl to chaperoning trips out of state, even because of the wonderful flexibility of my job. And my daughter, unlike a lot of teenagers these days, she wants me there. She requests that I come and be there. And now we've been separated. And every day, every minute, every second without her is a day that I'll never get back. A day that we'll never get back. Time that we will never get back. And right now, I'm still working with defenders of children and doing what we can, but even I've sought out high dollar attorneys. And they're all saying, this judge has painted you into a hole. Yep. And it's going to take, it's going to major heavy lifting to dig you out of it. And again, so this is where I am with everything. And so I have decided to become a warrior, not sit. It's been hard. Started from the bottom. I'm learning as we go. It's been my rock. My parents have been there every step of the way. I couldn't do it without any of them. My parents, her grandparents, they're devastated. Nobody can talk to her. They've taken her away from all of us. No phone calls. It's rare, a rare occasion that she gets to talk to grandma, and it's monitored. It's always supervised. I have started building a coalition. And this is where I am. I just got business cards. I've got business cards for everybody and spreading the word and doing what I can from Arizona. And I came out here because we upped on the red eye last night, and I appreciate this opportunity to just speak and get started with this and start speaking more and praying that somewhere along the way we will find that one person to see that this is so incredibly wrong. My goal is, number one, obviously, to get my daughter back home and safe.
Amen.
Number two, to do whatever I can in my power to prevent this from ever happening to anybody else. I don't wish this on anybody. If there's another mother out there that doesn't know where to start, then pass my number on, my email address. I want to do everything I can pressing forward to make sure that these people that we are putting in power, we are putting them in power, and they are not being held accountable. They're not. There's no repercussion for them. They can rip our children out of our homes, out of our lives, take them and treat them like they're theirs, and they're making decisions. They're making decisions for my daughter's future, for her college, for her summer camps and things that she's starting her freshman year. I'm her sophomore year. School starts next week. I'm supposed to be back to school shopping with her. I'm supposed to be going to school to pick up her new sophomore school books and her new school schedule. I have my moments, and on those days, I just sit, kneel, and pray. Sometimes I have to be helped. Sometimes it takes a phone call from across the states. But I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm not going to stop. And if there's anybody that can just help jump on the bandwagon, I'm going to start my coalition, and as little as I can do, I'm trying to get a website set up and move forward. And I want to learn as much as I can so that I can continue to impart everything that I learned to others along the way as well, and become as empowering as everybody that we've listened to here tonight. So I appreciate you all listening. Questions, I know I've muddled through this a little bit, and I'm sure there's a lot that I've left out maybe. Try to read without spilling anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our government at work.
Yep.
Really? The best we can do. This lady's picked up the cudgel when I was talking about this earlier at the start of the meeting. Becoming a warrior. Support her, get her story out there. She's going to produce a story for me, she doesn't know, but she's going to write me an article. And I'm going to get that out, and I'm going to get that viral.
Amen.
Oh, I cry now.
I got a question in the back.
Sure.
I got the cards, and it says cafpac.com.
Yeah.
Is it a .org or something? Because .com doesn't seem to fly.
No, that's what I was talking about. I jumped the gun. I was hoping to get my website up and going, and I haven't yet because I'm
No problem.
working on funding. I'm working
No
on help getting it together, and that's where I'm at.
We actually had a question emailed into us from Mark Adams, who's one of the directors of the foundation, saying, do you think that the jury would have made the same decision that the judge made regarding your daughter's custody? He thinks that you realize that the jury would be more likely to take action in the best interest of the child than the judge.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Another problem with doing away with jury trials. You know, the system has been put into place to screw we the people, and they're doing a royal job of it. And stories like this.
Would you even have a jury in the family court?
No.
No.
I even requested a best interest attorney be assigned to my daughter, and he refused. I requested her have her own attorney. I would pay for it. He refused. The only thing he gave her that I requested was her safe haven counselor, and I'm grateful for that because at least she has someone to talk to.
One last question over there. Then
Have you tried to take it to the state attorney's office?
Yes, in fact, we haven't gotten far enough with it, but I'm in communication with, they're even taking child support from me right now for this because he's got sole custody. He doesn't have custody of her, but they're still taking the money from me. And then they double collected and took my income tax refund. So they've got twice, so they're still.
Just to put that in perspective, he's $13,000 behind in child support.
Right.
He hasn't worked in 7 years. He's trying to get disability from the state for irritable bowel syndrome. He lives in a 3,500 square foot home. Wife drives a late model BMW, and he gets food stamps. And the judge
This is
did
America.
exactly what she described to you.
Can you be of some help to him?
I might be able to.
I think I'm going to put you two together. This is Michelle, with her husband's on the board of the foundation as well.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe you can make your way around over with that.
Thanks, Fred.
Our third speaker, Danielle, is the Liberty lobbyist, legislative consultant. As a dedicated member of the Liberty First Network team, she is co-host of the Liberty Underground Show, and co-author the Neighborhood Project book. The topic for her presentation tonight is the Liberty First Network Schoolyard, and she and Alex are going to be coming up and doing that. After that, we're going to have closing remarks from me, and we'll draw the raffle prize. Someone's going to go home and cook some rice. All right.
Is that thing turned on?
No, I think we're turning it off. Just listen to me.
Where?
That's it.
On the strip?
It's on the, to the stage.
No, they're still in there.
Is it on?
Yeah.
I thought you pushed it down to turn it off.
What did he, you know, if he did anything?
He wasn't, when you go to the stage.
What I did was push the power button.
Yeah, we're good.
Are we good?
You might want to take that thing out of the way.
All right, is it going to show up better than that? I think it's all right. I think it's good enough. All right. Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm with the Liberty First Network. And if you haven't heard about us, what we do with the Liberty First Network is we're actually lobbyists. But instead of being lobbyists for big corporations or special interest groups, we're actually lobbyists for the grassroots. We're the lobbyists for the people on liberty issues. So we go up to Tallahassee, we're talking to the legislators, we're lobbying for good legislation, we're lobbying against bad legislation. We're not funded by big corporations, we're funded strictly from the grassroots. But what we did this year, which is a little new, is we made a legislative scorecard. Because we go up there, we go up to Tallahassee, we're talking to these guys all the time, and then we go back and we see all these scorecards from all these other organizations, and we go, well, that isn't really what happened. So we made our own scorecard, and what we did is we picked 20 pieces of legislation. We did it on anything that could be a definitive liberty issue. If there was a back and forth on it, then we didn't include that one. But we have civil liberties issues, we have economic issues, we have a lot of array of different things, business regulations, and we graded all of our legislators and gave them an actual grade, unweighted. But I'll go through some of the methodology and stuff. Or did you want to go?
No, that's fine.
So what we did is we took these 20 pieces of legislation and we chose whether we opposed it, whether it was bad legislation or whether it was good legislation, and we gave everyone 5 points for voting the right way on it. But what we also did, which is what nobody else does, is we gave them a -5 if they voted the wrong way on it. Because if you vote the wrong way and against liberty, you should be penalized as a legislator. And we did. And then if they didn't vote, if they just abstained, they got a 0 because you didn't represent the people. You don't gain anything, but you don't lose anything. The criteria for choosing the legislation is, could we definitively say this was a liberty issue? Did it affect spending where we were spending money that we shouldn't have been spending? Were we limiting the rights of the people? Were we putting more erroneous business regulations onto our small businesses around the state? And that's really what we looked at to say, to pick these 20. Go up. What you will see in here is what we left out. And what we left out are things what we call political theater. Where on the surface it looks like it did something great, but in all reality it did nothing. One of the bills I like to talk about when we talk about that is the Common Core legislation, where they're gonna tell you for education materials. We gave back all the control to the local school boards for educational materials. They're going to say, we passed this bill, and it's up to your school boards to pick educational materials, not us, don't worry about it. Well, they did make that bill. What they also are not telling you is that they also have to comply with the Florida statutes, which means that they have to have Common Core related educational materials. They also get their funding, and teachers get merit pay raises, based on how well they do on the Common Core compliant testing. So if your funding is Common Core and the statutes say that you have to comply with Common Core, there's only 2 companies that provide Common Core compliant educational materials, so what choice is that? So we threw that out. That's not a good bill, because it didn't do anything. It was just lip service. So we threw all that legislation out. That could not be included in here, but I'll go through the ones that we did include. In HB 89 was the threatened use of force. What currently happens in stand your ground, in the stand your ground law, is that if you feel like you are in imminent danger, you have the right to use force up to deadly force. What happens is if you don't use deadly force and fire a warning shot, you actually can be considered under the 1020 life law and be committing a felony with a firearm and actually be sentenced to 20 years to life imprisonment because you felt your life was in danger and you didn't kill them. This would change that. This would make it to where if you felt that you were in imminent danger and you used any type of force, even a warning shot, you could fall under the stand your ground law and be free from prosecution. So this was a good piece of legislation. We supported this. The license to carry concealed weapons.
One other thing. This also shows you the negative effects of mandatory minimums and how something like a mandatory minimum can cause a really bad problem.
Trying to get that a little more out of the way. Yeah, so then license to carry concealed weapon or firearm. What this would do would allow you to get your concealed weapons license in your tax collector's office instead of going to only being able to send it to Tallahassee. They're going to call you and say, well, we never got it, or, you know, all those other things that happen when you deal with government. You can go right into the tax collector's office and get your concealed weapons permit. HB 25 actually goes with HB 523. This is that if you get a concealed weapons license, or if you apply for one, even if you never end up getting it, that your information cannot be made public record. So this was a good bill. We supported this one as well. HB 7029 is the Code of Student Conduct, which was nicknamed the Pop-Tart Bill. And I actually never thought as a lobbyist that I'd be standing in front of a group of people saying you can now eat your pastry in any shape that you want. Yay. I actually thought that was just kind of inherent. But we actually have a bill here, and this just shows these zero tolerance policies in school are really just ridiculous policies. Because we had to actually have a piece of legislation that says a child can draw a gun on a piece of paper and not be thrown out of school. That they can put together, snap together blocks and say bang and not be thrown out of school. Or they can eat their pastry in the shape of a weapon and not be thrown out of school. But because we still have zero tolerance policies, we did support this legislation because we do think that you should be able to eat your pastries however you want to eat them. What we did oppose is HB 7095, which is the professional sports facilities. And what this would do is fund over 30 years payments to the 9 professional sports facilities around the state of Florida. So every year they're just going to get your money. Not because of anything that they've done special, but just because they're here in the state of Florida, we're going to fund them for the next 30 years and give them a little money every single year. Right. So we actually opposed this one. It wasn't a big surprise. The inmate re-entry. Now this is one that on the surface actually looks like a very compassionate bill. What this would do would be to help inmates as they're being reacclimated into society get their identification. This is an unequal treatment under the law kind of bill. What this does is make it so that inmates that are coming out of prison or county jails and things would be able to get a Real ID compliant license without actually having to go through the measures of Real ID. Even though you're going to have to bring all that paperwork, you're going to have to pay all of the fees, someone coming out of jail isn't going to have to comply. And at the end of the day, if we need Real ID, if we're going to have these provisions to get a license, then everybody should be treated the same.
That's right.
We should never penalize someone coming out of jail and make them go through more, but they should be treated the same. So we looked at this as unequal treatment under the law, and we opposed this bill. The General Appropriations Act, we were strongly in opposition to this. It was an increase of almost $11 billion. It's a $77.1 billion budget. It was way too big, very bloated. The pork in here was even more than the legislators thought that they could get away with. Even the Mahaffey Theater in St. Petersburg got $500,000 that they didn't even ask for. So when you have businesses getting money that they didn't even ask for, that's too much. So we strongly oppose this piece of legislation. HB 599, this is the public records exemption for automatic license plate readers. And I want to say this here. We don't feel that license plate readers are constitutional. We feel that it is a violation for law enforcement to be able to read your license plate and know who you are and where you are on the roads. Unfortunately, that's not the bill that we had up there this year. We tried, we would have liked to see that go somewhere, but it didn't. And as lobbyists, we have to work with what is there, not what we'd like to be there. So we have to pick and choose our battles. This was one that at least, if they're reading your license plate, your information could not be made public. And although it isn't the bill we wanted, which would be to get rid of the license plate readers, at least this was a step in protecting your information. So we did support the bill. HB 7123 is the motor vehicle and mobile home tax fees and surcharges. This is a great one. Everybody knows that in 2009, your auto tags basically doubled or tripled in price. The Florida legislature this year has decided to give you a $25 decrease of the increase. So you will now pay actually roughly, and I'm saying roughly because if you have a compact car, you're only going to pay $18.86 less. But on average, you're going to be about $25 less. Now they're looking at this, your politicians are going to be out on the campaign trail saying, look what we did. This was, $395 million in a tax cut. And that $395 million means $25 to you. So thank them. HB 879, now we did support the bill because at least it's something. HB 879 is flood insurance. We actually did support this bill. What this would do would allow for more competition of private industry in the flood insurance industry. So what this would do would actually lessen the regulations on what would be considered a flood insurance policy and could be used in the state of Florida. Now, if you have a mortgage on your home and your mortgage company wanted a better policy, you would still have to comply with that. But people who were mortgage-free, who said, you know what, I'm willing to take a little more risk and go with a company that isn't as reputable, you would now be allowed to. We supported this bill, and this did pass in the House and Senate, and this is going to, make sure that we get citizens out of the flood insurance business, at least for some customers. So that was a good bill. The carrying concealed weapon and concealed firearm. We very much supported this bill. What this would do would allow you in a state of emergency, if you were under a forced evacuation, you would be able to take your firearms with you, even if you didn't have a concealed weapons permit. This was very important in New Orleans. When what happened is that people were being told that they had to evacuate, which of course we've seen the devastation that happened. They needed to evacuate. But they were told that they were not allowed to bring their weapons, even if they had a concealed weapons permit. And what happened is all these people leave their home, and what's left there for looters is all of their weapons. So their weapons ended up in the hands of people that didn't want to do good things with them. And what was happening is now these people are well armed and going into these places where everybody is housed, where none of the good guys are armed anymore. And police were taking away firearms of good citizens, and they ended up in the wrong hands. So in Florida, we wanted to stop that. We had a couple really legislators who were really passionate about this. They wanted to make sure that that could never happen in Florida. Unfortunately, this bill did pass the House in a vote of 80 to 36, but it did die in the Senate. So this... Okay. So this did not become a law this year. I have already been told that this is going to be reintroduced, as long as the legislators that introduced it win their re-election. But so it will be reintroduced. This was a good, strong bill. Not everyone was in favor of it. What did you want to say?
Well, this is another example of the special interest that you're up against up in Tallahassee, you pay for them. And what I mean by you pay for them, the Florida Sheriff's Association came out in uniform up to Tallahassee to basically use the public safety as the issue as to why this one wouldn't pass. Now the NRA was good on this one. The NRA came out in support of the bill, but the Florida Sheriff's Association went up there in opposition to this bill very, very strongly. And they were on your tax dollars when they did it. So you just remember, the special interest groups that we have, you fund some of them. You just want to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have many of the lobbyists that are up in Tallahassee are actually publicly funded lobbyists. They work for the counties, cities, municipalities, and things like that. So a lot of lobbyists are actually paid for by tax dollars. Rental car surcharge. And this isn't a big thing here. This is actually seen more down in South Florida. What they have is called a car sharing service, which is a little different than a ride sharing service, which is in the news right now, like Uber and Lyft. This is different. This is almost like a timeshare for vehicles. You pay a monthly fee, and then you log in and say, you know what, I need to use the car to go to the grocery store for these couple hours. And you go and you pick up the car and you go for those couple hours, and then you leave the car back off. And this allows, if you're in a big city like Palm Beach or Miami, where everything is really compact, you don't need a car every day. So you pay a little bit every month. You're not having to house a car, find a spot for it, pay the insurance, but you get to use it when you want to. Well, the legislature said, well, they're not being taxed nearly enough, and they put a surcharge on it. So anytime you were to use a car that you paid for, you would pay $1 surcharge every time you used it under 24 hours, and a $2 per day surcharge if you used it more than 24 hours. So if you needed a car for 3 days, it cost you an extra $6 on top of what you already pay monthly for your car. So we oppose that. We did not think that there should be any regulation on that. HB 7053 is another one that we greatly oppose. This actually this reauthorizes the State Economic Enhancement and Development Trust Fund. What this does, this is another committee, basically. It's an unelected board that hands out your tax dollars to sports facilities. So not only are they just going to get a payment every year just for existing, but if they want to do renovations, if they say, oh, we need a facelift over here, they can go not to your legislators, but now they can go to this Economic Enhancement Development Board and say, we need money. And those people who are unelected will be able to hand out your tax dollars to these people. In the past, every single one of these enhancements, any sports facility that was asking for money would have to get a piece of legislation passed. Now they can just go to this board and say, we want money. And you don't even have to know about it. They don't have to report to you.
Can you say which ones of these passed and failed as you go?
Oh, yeah, no problem. This one passed. In fact, let me see. The rental surcharge passed. We did go through the concealed weapons one. That one died in the Senate.
Most of the bad ones
Most of these passed.
The vast majority of them passed.
Bicycle and pedestrian ways. Now this is one where on the surface you're going to say, well, I mean, that's not so bad. It's a bicycle and pedestrian way. It's going to go from coast to coast. I mean, you know, I like bikes. You know, that would be cool. This was $20 million the first year, plus upkeep, maintenance, and everything else on a bike path. Now, I don't know if you've heard, I mean, I was listening to the radio today down in South Florida, because we were in South Florida this morning, and they have a drawbridge down there that they're afraid is going to collapse or get stuck standing up, straight up. But yet we're putting $20 million into a bicycle path, plus the maintenance, plus all the other stuff that goes into this, instead of fixing the bridge that collapsed in Clearwater. So we looked at this as just reckless spending. It was unnecessary, so we opposed this. Although it did pass, it passed the House 114-0 and the Senate 37-2. HB 1237, this is the special districts.
Well, you need public retirement plans.
Oh, you already went up one.
It was
Okay.
113 to 4 and 39 to 0 for the last one.
Okay.
Unanimous in the Senate, by the way.
Yeah, most things in the Senate go unanimously. There's very little opposition in the Senate. Now in the House, sometimes you'll see a little dissension. The Senate is unanimous almost every time, especially if it's really bad. The retirement plans, we actually supported this. This would actually allow newly hired state workers to go into a 401k system instead of a pension system. Now 401k systems, we would still be spending the same amount of money initially. We would be investing in their retirement, but it wouldn't be the pensions that would be paid out. So we would always know that retirement was funded because it would be funded through a 401k system. 401k systems have historically gotten a greater return for retirees. So if you have a pension system, you may get a certain amount every month. You generally get about a third more if you've invested in a 401k system over your pension system. So it's a win-win. We're not going to collapse the system with pensions in the state of Florida, and retirees get more money. Unfortunately, this bill died in the Senate. It did pass the House 74 to 44, but in the Senate it wasn't even heard. So as much as we felt this was a good bill, the Senate didn't agree. The admissions tax, this is under existing Florida law. If you sell or receive anything of value, then you're pretty much exempt from the 6% sales tax. This is going to re-implement it, so let's say you win NFL tickets on the radio, you are now going to have to pay the taxes on it, where before it was a gift. As long as the face value didn't change, you would be exempt from the taxes. This is just another way to kind of say, well, you know, we don't get enough money from you. And it does go to, this actually goes to fund more of the stadium renovations and stuff. They give sports facilities a lot of money this year.
Did it pass?
It passed.
It did pass. Yeah, this one passed the House 114 to 0 and the Senate 37 to 2. The HB 1237, this is the special taxing districts. That one you can go on now. What this is, anyone who lives like in a CDD or a DDA, some of these communities that are actually their own special taxing districts, these have elected boards that don't actually have to tell you where they're spending your money. And that's been a big problem, and people have been quite upset because they're paying more in property taxes to not know where their money is going. So this would actually make it to where they would actually have to report, it would be public record, anyone who lives in any of these small communities that are getting taxed extra just for living there, and voluntarily, they're allowed to do it. You will have to be told where your money is going every single year. So we looked at this as a good transparency issue. We did support it. It passed the House 115 to 0 and the Senate 38 to 0.
Which did make us nervous.
Yeah, I did have to reread the bill to make sure it was good. HB 1385 is the Inspectors General. This is the Office of Inspector General. Now, most of the time, when they create a new level of bureaucracy in government, we hate it. This one we actually did support. This would actually hold our politicians accountable to make sure that everything was within the current law. That if they're passing new spending, they're passing new laws, they have to be within the already set parameters of the law, that they can't be way outside of there. And it also gives a place for the public to complain and actually have some of their voices heard. So we actually did support this. You could report waste or fraud to this organization, and you would not be allowed to be fired if you reported it to them and went through the proper channels. So we actually did support this. It passed the House 114 to 0 and the Senate 37 to 1.
Which made us nervous.
Which again made me have to reread it. HB 115. This is the public meetings in universities. Now, a lot of times when we hear about new pieces of legislation being proposed, we hear a lot about the university study that goes along with it. Well, we have to implement this new law because the University of Florida says this is what happens if we don't. Well, a lot of times when you look to see who funded that study, you notice that it's the same people that'll benefit from the law. What this would do would actually make it to where who funded the university study would now be anonymous. They don't have to tell you. So you as the public wouldn't know that there's this bias in the study for the legislation that they're creating and citing this study. So we opposed this. It did actually pass the House 83 to 33 and the Senate 36 to 2.
Naturally.
Of course. HB 227, this is the last one in the House. This is victims of wrongful incarceration. What happens if you're wrongly incarcerated, if you've been in jail for 10 years and all of a sudden they let you out and say, you know what, we've looked back at your case and in the appeals process we've seen that we actually never had enough evidence to hold you in the first place, you were released. If you were not officially exonerated, you did not have legal standing to actually sue for wrongful incarceration. That means you could have lost 10, 15, 20 years of your life and then they found out they never even had enough evidence to put you in jail, and you would never be able to sue for the time that you lost. This would change that to where if they didn't have enough evidence on you, no matter why they released you, you were released, you were in jail wrong for for the wrong reasons, and you can be compensated for that. It still has to go to a judge. You still have to go through the process of making sure that your claim is legitimate through a judge and a jury and things like that. But before, you didn't even have the legal standing to do that. This would give you that right to have legal standing. So we did support this because we look at it as if someone didn't have enough evidence to convict you in the first place, then you have to be presumed innocent. They shouldn't have to prove that you're innocent. So we actually supported this bill. It did pass the House 116-0 and the Senate 38-0.
That made us nervous.
Which, always when things pass that we support, we have to reread them. In the Senate, we used this 18 of the same bills, so I'm not going to reread you the 18 bills that we used that were the same. We'll go to the 2 that are different. You know where they are? It's, oh, you passed one. Right there, the Springs bill. For the last few years, the Florida legislature has had just a war on septic tanks. If you are not on city or county sewer, they are coming after you. They do not want you to have a septic tank anymore. And how they're doing this, instead of just outlawing septic tanks, because then people would be upset, is what they're doing, saying it's a public safety hazard. We have to regulate these more. And they're regulating you right out of them. They're wanting more testing, and they want you to have all these things done that has never been needed in the state of Florida, and septic tanks have been here for decades. So this was another bill where they would have made people who own septic tanks go through red tape, bureaucracy, more regulations. They would have to get inspections upon inspections. So we looked at this as a bad bill. We opposed it. The Senate loved it. They passed it 38-0, but it did die in the House. So the people in the House did have a little sense on this one. And the last one is 20. And then the other bill in the Senate that never made it to the House is the craft brewery with the malt beverages bill. And if no one had heard about this on the news, there was a big issue going on with craft breweries. Craft breweries, and especially in Pinellas County, we have a bunch of them. These little microbreweries that are, crafting their own beer. They have the taps right there, so you can go and sample it. You can buy them in growlers. This is a big, booming industry in the state of Florida.
A lot of jobs, we gotta kill it.
14,000 jobs in the state of Florida for these craft breweries. They were under a tourism exemption because there is a federal law that says anyone who makes any kind of alcohol has to be what's called in the 3-tier system, which means that the person who makes the alcohol has to sell it to a distributor who then brings it to the retailer. And they did this after Prohibition, because in the 20s they thought we can get rid of Prohibition, but we have to make alcohol change 3 hands before it gets to the consumer, or else people will just be alcoholics. I mean, if I make beer and you buy it from me, you're going to be an alcoholic. But if you buy beer from you, who bought it from you, who bought it from you, you're no problem. It changed 3 hands. You will not be an alcoholic.
It's like the 3-pass rule in basketball.
Yes, that is actually the logic behind the 3-tier system, but the craft brewery industry was able to get a tourism exemption. The tourism exemption was actually made in the 70s for Anheuser-Busch. Well, Anheuser-Busch didn't really like that the craft brewery industry was on their tourism exemption, so they paid $84,000 to lobby to get this legislation passed. Then some other distributor said, oh, wait a minute, we're not getting our cut. We can throw in some money on this. So $848,000 later, given to politicians and PACs, they've crafted this bill, which really upset the people, because you just don't mess with people's beer. So all over the state of Florida, people were very upset about this 3-tier system and ending our craft brewery industry. They did have to keep caving on the bill. Originally, craft breweries would have to be involved in the 3-tier system, but because they would still be allowed to sell on site, they wouldn't actually have to give their beer to anyone. So they would have to make the beer, say, hey distributor, we made a bunch of barrels of beer. The distributor would say, okay, well you owe me a check for a few $100s because of that. And the beer would never leave. It was literally legal extortion. So people were upset, they kept getting calls, and eventually they had to keep backing off the bill, backing off. Then it was well, if you brew under 2,000 kegs, and then it was, well, if you brew 2,000 kegs and 20% goes into bottles, then we'll start to do it. No one was having it. It was a bad bill from the beginning. The Senate did pass it 30-10, but the House had the good sense to say this is just ridiculous. was. So that did not go through this year. Did you have a question?
I do. On these good bills that never made it and never been heard, I don't see one of them saying the GMO labeling.
That bill never got heard in committee, so because there was no vote record on it, we couldn't put it up here.
No, she's talking about that one right there.
You have there no record votes.
Yeah, no, she's talking about that. Why didn't we put the GMO there one?
We picked the top 5. The GMO labeling one, because it was a business regulation, because this was a committee that picked the 20 bills, not one single person. There was people on that committee that said it is a new business regulation and we shouldn't want the government to regulate business. Other people said that it's a fraud issue, and because there was no definitive yes or no, we had to use 5 that we could definitively say was a yes or no.
I was on your side on that one though. I thought we should have done it, but the 5 of us all have to agree on it in order for it to make it on there.
Right, there was
Because there is
5
something that you're forcing them to do that. So that was the reason why we didn't put it on there.
Yeah. But then we gave there was a bonus
Giving
fund.
the public more information is not a good thing.
You're forcing them to do it. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm just telling you the argument on the other side of it was that you're forcing
There was
them.
an argument on both sides.
There's always an argument on both
Well,
sides.
no, on the other ones, there was no argument from the committee on all sides. So we used the 5 where there was no argument. So we gave them 5 bonus points. And the reason why is if you were a sponsor or a co-sponsor of a piece of legislation that was a liberty issue that didn't get heard anywhere, we actually gave you bonus points. We gave the sponsor 10 bonus points. We gave any co-sponsors 5. Because you were willing to stand up for liberty. It just didn't get heard in committee because of other various reasons. These things happen a lot. So we used the Common Core bill, the Commission on Federalism, which would actually have to state where in the Constitution authorizes each piece of legislation, the red light camera repeal, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and then the nuclear and integrated gasification combined cycle power plants. This is actually that fee that you see on your electric bill for a nuclear plant that they can't ever build. This would repeal that so that they couldn't bill you anymore for it.
Yeah, it was never heard.
And it was never heard.
Oh, one other thing though. The Second Amendment Preservation Act, the reason that thing never made a committee is because of Marion Hammer and the NRA.
Yeah.
There's no getting around it. Marion Hammer and the NRA killed that bill. And the reason they killed that bill is because they are trying to pass something on a national level when it comes to reciprocity. So they did their lobbying. When they were good on one, they killed that bill because they make their money off of making sure that they can keep the concealed weapons things. So whenever you think about the NRA, remember this. They're in the business to make money, and they are protecting some freedoms of the Second Amendment, and some of them they're gonna try to stop you.
Yeah, they're against any kind of open carry or anything that would make you not have to have a concealed weapons permit. If you don't have to have a concealed weapons permit, the NRA is absolutely against the bill. And the reason for that is because the way they're funded is through the class to get your concealed weapons license.
So now go to the scores, right?
So now we'll go to the scores. Out of 160 legislators, that would be from both houses, John Tobias actually earned the highest score and Perry Thurston received the lowest. But we'll go to the House first. John Tobias had the highest score out of 100. He got a 65. He got a B. Because we did have to adjust because people could go into the negative. So we had to give them a few extra points between A's and B's. They got a few extra points. But even with getting extra points, our highest score is a B. That was John Tobias, which is a funny story because as we calculated everything, we didn't look at who voted for what bill. We picked the bills first. And then we went through and said, okay, who voted for it now that we have our legislation picked? This way we weren't swaying to any legislator. We had no idea. We had no idea who voted for anything. So I tallied up the votes, and I said, okay, I know who came in first. It was John Tobias. And everyone went, who? And he's just a little-known House representative in Brevard County who votes right a lot more of the time than everybody else. So he got a 65. We do have a couple C's. That was Ray Rodriguez, Dane Eagle, and Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith is actually Hernando in Citrus County. We got a couple of D's there, Matt Caldwell. Debbie Mayfield, and I do have to give Debbie Mayfield credit on Common Core, because she really toured the state trying to educate parents, teachers, legislators on the dangers of Common Core. She really worked hard for that bill. Her bill didn't go anywhere this year, but I have to give her credit for how hard she worked on the issue. So I will give Debbie Mayfield credit for that. Who's in this, who do you have in this county? Go up one. we get from D's to D minuses to F's.
Ed Hooper.
Ed Hooper, oh, is he up here? He's got a D? Oh yeah, there's Ed Hooper, he got a D. He got a 25 out of 100. He did not sponsor any liberty legislation, which did not come as any shock to any of us. And he is not running for re-election in the House because he wants to be your county commissioner. Yeah.
Accordingly.
He's going to take out the only good county commissioner we have on the board.
Yeah, exactly. Kathleen Peters is up there. She also got a 25. She has a D minus. Larry Ahern is there. He's our first Pinellas County F. And who you got there? Castor Dental is in somewhere else. Pasadomo. I don't know what else you have up here. Now, if you look at here, you will see that in the red is Republicans and the blue is Democrats. There is no, like, they're mixed. There's a lot of Fs. Who else is in Pinellas County?
Carl Zimmerman got an F. He got a
Oh yeah, Carl Zimmerman got an F. He got a 20. Out of the Democrats, though, he did pretty good.
Dwight Dudley's around here too. He got an F.
Yeah, Dwight Dudley is down here. He got a 10.
Yeah, then you keep going from there.
And it gets worse. Perry Thurston is the worst in the House. He has a negative 30. Overall in the House, out of 100, their score was 16. That was the average. The Republicans' average score was 24, and the Democrats' average score was 2.8.
So it's like poison against hanging.
Yeah.
Is this all on the website?
Yes, it is on the website. In the Senate gets much worse. Like when I say when they do bad things, they do it as a pack. Here we go. Senator Greg Evers, he has the highest score with a C. He has a 55. There is one thing I will say about Senator Evers. He votes horribly. Horribly. Senator Evers does not vote good at all, but he does sponsor a lot of liberty legislation. So he'll propose a lot of good stuff, and then he'll vote horribly. But because he did propose a lot of good stuff, he did get some extra credit points. So he did get what did he get there? A C. He's our only C in the Senate with a 45. Renee Garcia is the only D with a 25. Everybody else failed, including Jeff Brandes.
Yeah, including Jeff Brandes.
Jack Latvala, no surprise, got a 10. He failed. What you will see in the Senate is that there is no definitive party line. They are completely mixed Republican and Democrat. They all vote bad all the time. And I honestly, I like Jeff Brandes. I'm in his office a lot, and I talk to him every time I'm up there. He votes party line though, and he votes party line even when he knows it's wrong.
He wants to go further along than where he is.
Right. And I like Jeff. I sit in his office every time when I go up there. We have a great relationship. But when it comes down to party pressure, I have sat in his office and heard him say to me, I know you're right, but they're never going to go for it. The party's just not ready for that. So it just happens. Now, in the Senate, the average score for the Republicans was 3.65. Oh, 3.65. Let me get that. And in the the Senate Democrats, their average score is negative 7.5. They're all bad all the time.
Now the one thing is that if you go to libertyfirstfl.org, you can actually print a copy of it yourself. You can print a copy of it for yourself. We print a bunch of copies for everybody, but they're expensive to do that.
Say that again.
libertyfirstfl.org. If you go there, there's a tab on the right hand, there's a tab up top, and it says Liberty Issues. If you hover your mouse over that, it'll come down to where it says 2014 Legislative Scorecard. You click on that. It's actually a scribd document. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's an online way in which you can put the documents there, and you can download it from there. Here's what I suggest that you do with it. You are going to see your representative at some time between now and election time. You're going to go to either some kind of a town hall event, you're going to go to some kind of an event. Don't let them lie. Know what they voted for. Like when you go in there, again, the reason that we made this is two reasons. One, to show you how bad they are. And to be able to define it. When we say they all suck, you're like, come on, you're just saying that because you're libertarian. No. We can give you the proof as to why they suck. But the thing is this. You have to call them on it. You have to continually question them on it because they think they're getting away with stuff. The sports team stuff, they voted so they didn't have to vote anymore, and yet they get to keep the money. That's why they did it. So you as an individual gotta look, again, we wrote this up in a very, very good way. So you can kind of highlight which bills that you really want to talk to that representative on. You go back to their name, you see which one they voted on. So when you go and talk to them, you say, why did you vote yes on that bill right there? And they're gonna go, there was a lot going on with that bill. And you go, no, this is exactly what this bill did. You knew this. Why did you vote on this bill? And you got to hold their feet to the fire with this stuff.
I'll tell you a funny story with everybody's favorite Senator Jack Lala. I was up in Tallahassee this session, and I'm walking around, and we were lobbying against the changes to Stand Your Ground. What they were trying to do is weaken Stand Your Ground in one of the bills. And I was lobbying against that. I was very upset. It had gone to one committee that Senator Jack Lala sat on. It had moved to another committee and changed, so it had to go back to his committee for approval again. And I was walking the halls, and I came out of his office, and I'm like, I was, just looking to give you some information. One of his constituents was with me and said, Senator Latvala, I'm one of your constituents, and I'd like to know how you feel about the changes to Stand Your Ground. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about, I haven't read it. And I said, well, Senator, it was already in your committee once and you voted for it. Are you saying you didn't read it before you voted for it? Which then went on to anger the senator from Pinellas County, and he was very, very angry and upset with me. And he said, well, if I read it and I voted for it, then I supported it, and they're good changes, and I've got to go now, and he left. But that's what you have to do, because the one thing that they want to do is get you out of their face and stopping you from asking them questions all the time. So if they can say, I didn't read it, I don't know what you're talking about, that's still sitting on my desk, that's what they're going to do, because what we know is that politicians want to give you the least amount of information so you can be the least amount angry with them.
Because if you knew everything, you'd be pissed.
So don't let them. What our job, and we're a nonpartisan organization, the Liberty First Network is a nonpartisan organization. We go up there, we lobby. We're not promoting any candidates or anything, we're just about legislation. And the reason what we do and why we do what we do and why we stay grassroots funded is because we want to give you the information you need to hold your representatives accountable. Because we can't change the representatives that go up there, we need you to do that. But I can tell you this, that I go up there not offering a senator or a representative anything. I'm actually most of the time telling them they did something wrong. But every time I go, and especially in, like, I was talking about Jeff Brandis, when I go in there and I say, hey, it's Danielle from the Liberty First Network, people get thrown out of offices so that I can sit down and talk to them. And that's not because I do anything special, because I don't. It's because of everybody in this room. It's because of everybody across the street that when I put out an action alert saying, look at what they want to do to your beer, they get hundreds upon hundreds of calls saying, what the hell do you think you're doing? And then when I go up there, after they've heard from every constituent in the area that they're pissed, I go in there and say, okay, you want to have a real conversation now? And they sit me down in their office. I can't do what I do. John can't do what he does, and Paul or other lobbyists cannot do what they do without the grassroots. And it is really because of you. So I know that a lot of times we come up there, we tell you all these bad things that go on, and you walk away going, oh, nothing's ever going to change, these guys are just horrible. They're just going to take away all their liberty, and we're just going to be in tyranny and FEMA camp soon. I can tell you this, that at least in Tallahassee, they do listen because they're afraid of you. And they're afraid of you being educated, and they know that we're the group educating you. So when we put out an action alert, you guys are affected. They just don't want to tell you that.
You had a question, Ambassador? Oh. Then you go next. Yeah.
I think what you do is very commendable. Is there such an organization for other states and in Washington that does incredible job of doing?
Not that I know of, man. I mean, honestly, we only worry about Florida, so I can't tell you what happens in other states, so I can't say yes or no. And in Washington, and this is really going to sound kind of like negative Nancy on this, so I'm going to have to apologize. I don't know of a national organization that actually does it right. I just don't, and I wish I could tell you of a good one.
Pretty sad.
No, it's completely sad. And you want to know why it's sad though? Because it is not. I'm not going to talk badly about this organization, but I'm going to use them as an example right now. AFP put out a scorecard last year. They gave 35 representatives or 40 representatives A+. I was offended. I was offended by that one. And the reason I was offended is because they were wrong. They didn't do that, but what they did was they skewed what they voted on. They skewed what they counted. Now, we put this out before AFP got to put out their 2014 one. And they only had about 5 or 6 A's in this next one. Because they had to adjust what they were going to count because they had to look at this. So I guess we can adjust some of these other groups. And sometimes, again, I have my issues with other groups, and I do apologize. The people of AFP that are the grassroots people, wonderful people. It just sucks that they're going to tout Rick Scott as a constitution or a fiscal conservative when he just signed the largest budget in Florida history. That one's a little offensive to me. But I wish I could tell you of another group. And unfortunately, we have no plans of going national. We're staying in the state of Florida because it is hard enough to do this stuff right here. Like, when we put this together, we did not just put together one thing. Right now on the website, you have a legislative analysis of 2014 on crony capitalism, on corporatism. It shows you exactly where they put the money, exactly where they voted on it this year, and exactly what happened. We're going to do something later on that's going to connect the dots to the actual individuals and the actual politicians. We did one on Common Core that laid out Common Core the best way we possibly could. We did the same thing with the red light cameras to show you why they are not going to be changing red light cameras anytime soon. And again, that's not to make you feel bad about it, but it's to tell you, you got to know what reality is. So when one of these politicians say, hey, we got you, man, we're going to take care of you, you realize they are lying to your face. It's when they tell you they're not going to do something, more than likely, it's when they're telling you the truth. Because if they're going to be, here, I'll give you my cell phone number so you can give me a call whenever you have concerns. We just love it when you grassroots people come up here. If they do that stuff, you are being handled. Just know that. Because if they're being nice to you, then they don't view you as a threat. It's when they go, okay, sit down, let me close this door so nobody else can hear what the heck's going on. It's when that happens, that's when it's serious. And with this book, and again, with this book, if you read this, if you read all the other analyses, what that does for you as an individual is it gives you the ability to get past the nice guy politician and to get real with somebody. Because what you'll end up doing is saying, like what we heard about Common Core, well, Jeb Bush liked it, so we had to pass it. That would make your blood boil, but they really don't want to tell you that, but you got to get past you got to get past the nice guy into the real guy in order to make it real.
The nice guy is going to say, well, come on, we have to have standards. Don't you want our children to have a good education with standards? Because that's what they do. They take a very logical argument and make it emotional. But when you really end up having a real conversation with them, because I had several this year in Tallahassee, and say, okay, I really want to know what's going on with HB 25 and why it isn't going anywhere. And you know what I was told? Jeb Bush is for it. It's an election year. I can't go against it.
Say bye, yes, sir.
We are obviously annoyances when we voice our opinions to our representatives.
Good.
Would it empower you more if you had those same people voice their opinions to you, so that when you're behind closed doors, you could say, Senator, look what we have before us?